And we're back. Bits and Bytes podcast, episode 18. We are excited to be back in the studio today. We got a couple good friends with us. I'm Matt Scott with my co-host,
Joey Wensler. It's an absolute honor to be back in the stew right here in Duluth, Georgia at Byteworks headquarters. And we do have two phenomenal guests, Matthew P. Scott. Of course, we have Byteworks' very own Michael Allshouse. But I would dare say, perhaps more importantly today, Mateo, we have Andy Green, and he is Director of IT for Guardian Pharmacy. And boy, oh boy, what a huge business that is. I can't wait to get into all things IT with you today, Andy. It's going to be fun.
Andy, thanks for joining us. Just to level set all of our listeners, we created the Bits and Bytes podcast to share the latest and greatest in technology, bring in subject matter experts, and really to grow from one another. This is not something that is self-serving. This is more serving for our audience and to learn something, take something away, and hopefully get better together. So on this lovely Friday afternoon, Andy, thanks for making some time for us. We're excited to jump into things, in the world of mergers and acquisitions and, how IT plays into that. Oftentimes people get excited about the shiny and bright lights and, what's going on with the actual strategy of the acquisition and the reason, but sometimes don't think about some of the more strategic elements and things on how do things gel together? Are there vulnerabilities? Are there risks? A lot of the things that you are looking at and considering. So love to have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your role, your company, and then we absolutely have several questions for you.
Okay. Well, as you stated, I'm Andy Green, Director of IT at Guardian Pharmacy. I've been here about a year and a half, been in IT for 25 years. So it was a good move to come to Guardian Pharmacy. That's a long-term care pharmacy. If you don't know what that is, we only deliver medications to skilled nursing centers and long-term care facilities. So we package the medications so that it's easy for the caretakers to give the medications, right? So like everybody else, they're short-staffed. They're trying to get medications to 100 or 200 or 300 people in a facility, and we package it specifically for the ease of them to make sure that the right medications are given to the right individuals.
Reduce the mistakes, right?
Reduce the mistakes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great place to work. It's the culture is caring, and it's a phenomenal operation.
I have to think from the knowledge that I have of that niche in the market, it's growing like leaps and bounds. I mean, people are living longer. The need for, assisted care as you're getting older and age is continues to grow. So that's
yeah. We use medication to solve problems, but sometimes interacting with different medications causes more problems, right? So we're also very involved in making sure that there's no cross-pollination, if you will, of the medications that we're giving people, and it's a full-time job, right? Always,
and off the top for me, it makes me think of two immediate things for these two fields. You have a collision, essentially, of healthcare and all the regulations and compliance that comes with that field. And then you have these 55 fulfillment centers, which you are essentially acting as a distributor, to a lot of these long-term care centers.
So what's the size of Guardian? Yeah, 55, that took me a little bit by surprise. So
so we have about 55 pharmacies across the U.S., always acquiring. We'll probably acquire 3 or 4 a year for the foreseeable future. Acquisitions are strategic in two ways. Number one, where we're putting what we call a pin on the map, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But number two is we want to make sure that the entrepreneur that started the pharmacy wants to continue to grow his pharmacy, right? So we're not coming in to say, okay, Matt, we're taking your place on and you're leaving. That's not our strategy. Our strategy is, hey, let us take the overhead of HR and legal and, purchasing and some of these other things off your plate so you can focus on caring for your customers and growing your business. We take all that overhead stuff off your plate and let you focus on doing what you do best, which is making relationships and delivering medications.
And I'm sure that with that comes, with all these acquisitions, a lot of different technology. Probably some that you've never seen, before, with some chewing gum and, bubble wrap wrapped around it,
So, well, yeah, you're not wrong, actually. It's a very low margin business, right? We're not talking about 50 or 60 points. We're talking about 7 to 10 points
Yeah.
of margin. And, it takes money to run a business. You got to hire people. And sometimes the technology, although it is what really keeps the business running, is neglected, because we can put just a little more, stick a RAM in that box and let it run for another year, right? Or we'll kick it a couple times and try not to restart it, and it'll run for whatever period of time, right? So that kind of mentality sometimes takes over, just because, first of all, they're not IT people, and second of all, they're focused on being the business that they're in.
So what kind of risk does that propose?
Well, it certainly proposes a huge risk, right? All of the applications are run either on site or in the cloud, right? So if your application is down, you can't enter prescriptions, you can't fulfill delivery, you can't box it, you can't check it. So it causes a huge, huge issue in the pharmacy if they're down. It's risk versus reward, right? What's the risk of it going down versus the reward, if something happens, and how do they recover? Just speaking from experience, we had an issue. Most of our stuff is in Azure. And when they had that issue last year, right, where the central region was down, it caused us huge issues, right? I mean, people have to have those medications, so they have to figure out how to get them to them. And when your primary software application for running the pharmacy,
The back end.
is offline, it causes all sorts of issues.
And that's impacting almost 200,000 people, because I think the last synopsis on the scrapes of Google says about 174, but as you continue to acquire pharmacies and grow your footprint, I think across 36 states currently, and that's only growing. I can only think of the process, like before the buy, what kind of things perhaps Guardian's looking for, maybe some red flags, and what does that due diligence look like?
I don't think the due diligence is all that different from any other acquisition. From an IT perspective, we come in and say, what's the hardware? What's the age of the hardware? Where's it stored? What's your backup process? A lot of them use a third party for support on IT. So, we end up getting involved in discussions with the third party for support, who generally have a pretty good plan in place if something were to go south. But it's still a plan, right? And if something goes south, it causes big problems for the pharmacy. From our perspective, right, we're kind of looking at this more from where are you today versus how do we get you to where we need you to be in a year or two, right? So we understand you're using this software, you're using that hardware, you've got this switching infrastructure, you've got this firewall. We have our standard. We're going to come in pretty much immediately and replace your switching and firewall with our standard. That will get you sort of online with us. And then over time, we'll make the decision what to do with the rest of the environment you have in the facility. Likely we'll pull that and move it to Azure.
Nice.
Andy, what's at the very top of your list when you're performing that due diligence period? Is it security measures and the defenses of these companies, or is it more things like networking, firewall?
Security is certainly a big question, right? Have they ever been breached? What's the possibility of them being breached? Most are breached. Still be breached. Most of the applications aren't external facing, right? So they come in through either VMware or Citrix or some other RDP, some other mechanism. The application runs on their desktop. So generally speaking, there's not a lot of external facing, but everybody's getting email, right? So email is always the question.
And everyone's human.
And we've all got tools in place to try to keep from somebody clicking on something malicious, but stuff happens. That's part of life. So mitigating that risk is certainly very important on our priority list.
And So with all of that, what do you do as far as like centralized backup, or do you have various like hub data centers? I mean, you're not obviously going to have a individual data center in each one of these, 55 locations, right?
Right. The application itself is kind of interesting. Like there's not a multi-tenancy sort of deliverable on this. So we basically in Azure, we have a environment per pharmacy.
Yep.
And that environment is backed up either using Azure specific backups.
Everything to the cloud.
In some cases, we actually pull it back down. So we've got a copy off of the cloud if we had to restore somewhere else.
That's great. That's great. Where are you guys headquartered?
Headquartered here in Atlanta.
Yep.
Right. 285 and Cobb Parkway.
Awesome.
Close by.
I gotta know. I'm always gonna get the awkward thing out of the way. So y'all know me by now. Who we are. We're in the double digits of episodes here.
Can somebody cut off his mic?
Have you? Yeah. Hello. Is this thing on? 1, 2. So, have you ever walked into an IT environment that dropped your jaw, for better or for worse?
I was gonna ask the same thing. I wanted to know too.
Yeah, we want to know about this. Give us some detail.
The dirt.
I have. It
Both positive and negative.
Yeah.
Well, this one is negative and a bit scary. We literally walked into their quote unquote data center, which was in the basement of a building, right? And there's leaks. It's raining. There's water coming in under the door. The servers are literally sitting on a pallet. Literally sitting on a pallet. Wiring, to this day, I wouldn't know if they knew where the wiring was connected, right? So that was probably the scariest environment that I've taken a look at. Again, I'm not blaming anybody. You do what you have to do. That's the name of the game.
Well, is there a situation like that where you walk into this environment and you say, I have to raise my hand. I got to go to leadership.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't know. I wouldn't be doing my job with due diligence if I didn't call this out.
Yes, I mean, well, it goes back to my leadership for sure, but certainly to theirs as well, saying, hey, guys, should we move forward, we're going to need to do something about this. It all kind of figures a way to work itself out. But that was probably the scariest. Now, the best was you walk in, there's a nice clean rack. Everything's got cabled. It's labeled, all that stuff. And you see that on occasion too, right? So it's one way or the other.
Matt, you had a kind of a crazy proposition that everybody's human. So have you ever, for now, have you ever made a mistake in the merger process that you've learned from and applied those lessons moving forward?
Yes, we have. I wouldn't say it was in a merger necessarily. It was more of a pharmacy move.
Okay.
And we had a project manager, and then we had an internal kind of manager, but neither was talking to each other. Right? So we ended up going down to put the low voltage in, and there was no power.
Yeah.
So there's no power in the building, right? It can't be effective that way. So obviously we've learned, we're going to have to step in. We're going to have to make sure that the stakeholders and the communication is there, and that we're aware of what we're walking into, right? When you go down there, you've got a team of people to do a low voltage install and there's no power. It was embarrassing. It was costly, and it just delayed the project.
Yeah. Collaboration's key with everything. You said having the right stakeholders as being part of the project. So yeah, that's huge. I'm curious as far as how quickly I have to assume first few times that you've done these acquisitions, they took longer than others, and the speed has, probably accelerated through time. Is that a correct assumption?
Sure, absolutely. And I wish I could take credit for all of the learnings and the processes that we put in place since this started, but Guardian's been in business for 20 years, right? And they've grown by acquisition as well as organic growth. The acquisition process was in place way before I got there. I like to think that I've helped in a small manner by being part of the process now. But yeah, to your comment, the process has greatly accelerated from 20 years ago to today.
Does your service stop when the medication gets to the long-term care facility, or does it go all the way to the patient?
It goes all the way to the patient. We do trainings. We do help with benefits. I mean, you name it, and and we're involved.
And I can actually attest firsthand. I have a family member that is part of Guardian through her assisted living facility. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, definitely.
Helping keep her info safe and in order. And that's so huge because one wrong medication mixed with another can have devastating consequences.
Yeah, we had an incident at one point where a prescription was misentered into the system and it said 100 units of insulin. I'm a diabetic, been a diabetic my whole life, so
That's a lot.
that's a lot. Right? I mean, that's more than a day's dosage right there. So, making sure that that didn't happen is crucial, right? So,
Andy, I'm curious on another point here. When we talk about this process of due diligence and then ultimately integration into Guardian, there's two sides of this in my mind. There's the technology piece, and then there's the people piece, because there's people on the other end of these tools and within this company that you guys are evaluating and or acquiring. So I'm curious, what is the more challenging piece of this equation? Is it the people on the other end, because they now know they're being looked at, they're being evaluated, maybe they feel threatened, maybe their walls go up, and the collaboration at that point is difficult? Or is it truly the technology side, because oftentimes these environments are so rough?
that's a really good question. From the people side, that depends on the current owner, right? So does the current owner position it as this is a really good thing for us and here's what it's going to do to benefit us and here's how we're going to make use of, the scale of Guardian, which is generally the way it goes. Not very often do we have somebody say, oh, no, we're being bought. That means I'm going to lose my job, right? We don't operate that way. If you've got IT staff that's part of your pharmacy, we'll keep them, right? I mean, they'd obviously kept the business running for as long as they have, and there's no value in not having them join the team. The technology is sometimes challenging because there are several different pharmacy operating systems that are out there, and they're specific for long-term care pharmacies. And if you're using one that we haven't standardized on, we're probably going to ask you and require you to move to one that we've standardized on. And that becomes challenging, right? Because you're still trying to deliver medications, you're still trying to keep your customers happy, and we're trying to change the basis of how you're running your business. So that becomes a challenge. And most people are able to kind of learn the new system and make it work, but there's always people that just fight it and don't want any part of it. So that becomes a challenge.
Have you ever been challenged by the facility, like the actual structure of the facility, where like maybe you couldn't get Wi-Fi to a location due to, some restrictions or whatnot? Just thinking about like some of the challenges that could propose themselves.
So yes, some of these pharmacies are in very remote, isolated places. Lucky to have a circuit provider at all, but not two, right? So it's this is your provider and you're at his mercy of whether you are up or down, right?
Yeah.
And yes, that's not a common challenge, but certainly a challenge that we've had to.
Sure, I can imagine that in rural places you have older, construction and wasn't thought through for where we are today.
Yeah, one of them wanted to charge us $100,000 to bring the circuit, right? It's like, we're not going to do that.
And there's some redundancies too.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of these places are unfortunately either the last mile is by the same carrier, right? So I've got circuit A, circuit B, and they're both running through the last mile of the same carrier. So there's all kinds of challenges like that.
I can imagine.
So, Starlink and Cradle Points and that kind of stuff are
5G, yep. That's kind of what initially popped into my mind with some 5G APs or whatnot. Curious to get your opinion on this. So you've been there, how long did you say? A little over a year or
2.5
a year and a half. What is something that has moved faster than you thought it would since being in this role? Like, technology's moving so quick right now. Has anything surprised you?
Satellite.
Okay.
Starlink has become amazingly available.
Okay. And that's going to change the game for the dependency on the provider as well.
Change the game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking of Starlink in your position, but personal story here. We were at a baseball game, and one of the grandparents of our team needs to make sure that they get the Game Changer publish a video of the grandkids thing. So all of a sudden, we got Starlink out behind the dugout with we got this massive dish.
Yeah.
And we're now broadcasting to anybody that wants to see 11U KC Roos travel baseball. Don't worry, it's online. Okay, live.
That's the reliance we have on technology.
Yeah.
I mean, grandparents wanting to show off their kids. It's from that to I have to have it because I can't afford not to have connectivity at a pharmacy. So
Yep.
Leave it to youth sports.
yeah.
We should have a podcast on youth sports.
Oh my gosh.
Sweet tea volleyball.
Yeah.
Soccer tournaments. I mean, we could have a whole
I mean,
discussion on that
I
stuff.
know. It's totally wearing me out. I don't want it to end. It's going quick, but it's a lot.
But it did pique my interest. You said what's moved faster than you anticipated, and you mentioned satellites. But I want to know what's something that's moved slower than you anticipated or wanted.
Slower than I wanted.
Don't you love when we go off script?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what has gone slower because I've just been so interested in how we're going to do connectivity. I guess maybe the evolution of 5G and connectivity in the quote unquote wireless, right? I mean, it's 2025 and you can still get dead spots with cell coverage. How does that happen?
Right.
I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
how does that happen?
Yeah.
So I guess that would be the one thing that sort of frustrates me on both the personal and a professional level because, we should be able to use 5G at a pharmacy if Starlink or something isn't available, and oftentimes it just doesn't work.
Forward thinking here. What is a couple pieces of advice or thoughts that you would give to another, IT professional sitting in the seat of going through a merger or acquisition? What would you tell them that you've learned or a best practice?
Communicate for sure, but verify, right? You tell me that your Microsoft licenses are up to date, you've got software assurance, and you're sure that everything is status quo. Well, often it's not, right? You've added 10 users, they're not covered. That would be one thing. Make sure that licensing is adequate. Endpoint protection, you got to have something, right? If you don't, that's the first thing we're going to do. Even before anything else happens, we'll put SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or whatever your product is and verify the environment's clean.
Yep.
Because you can't have them plugging into your net.
That's right. Then all of a sudden they're in.
You're in trouble.
Yeah. That's great.
That's really good. And I will add to that because of all the conversations I have with folks in the marketplace that have these big IT departments, they have these big teams. It's amazing how often we find that there are surprises in their own environment.
Yeah.
So it's not just us learning these things for the first time. It's them learning that there's a set of devices that they don't know are on the network or something that isn't protected or there's licensing gaps.
Yeah.
So I completely relate with that comment. If I'm in your shoes, any other IT director's shoes that's going through this process, that verification would be the most important to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Andy, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to spend a little bit of time with us and share your learnings and lessons and knowledge, not only with us, but with our listeners, our viewers. We're excited to work with you some more. We appreciate you coming down here and doing this with us.
Yeah, definitely. It's been fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bits and Bytes Podcast, episode 18. We out.
Peace. Cool.